Thomas Beresford, you help people regulate their body and mind by working with the breath. You can just tell us how you got into this and how you help people.
Yeah, good question. Whenever anyone asks me this, I try to keep it brief and then I ramble. So I promise I'll try and keep it brief. So just chronologically, in 2010, I was sat with a doctor, and the doctor is there telling me that I've got an ectopic heartbeat. And I was like, what? He says, you've got an ectopic heartbeat. You are chronically stressed. I said, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed. He said, you are. Your body's telling me you are. Your body's changed because of it. And so we had this conversation, and effectively I was training to be a chartered accountant. I was due to sit my final exams later on that year. And I would have just said, I say this in my workshops, I would have described myself as busy, just got lots on, don't have a lot of spare time, wasn't really cooking properly. I was going to the gym, but there's things that suffer because of that. You squeeze your sleep, you don't really see people. There's lots of things that suffer when you're busy. So that happened. And then you put yourself under the psychological pressure as well of the exams. It's a big chapter in your life. There's some things about to change if you pass these exams. So there was that. And then fast forward a few years later when I'm working, I was traveling around Europe a lot in finance, from Malta to Cyprus to Holland, UK, things like that. It sounds glamorous, but it's not. Because you have to do all your traveling in your own time. You don't travel on company time. You travel in your own time. So your sleep suffers, your relationships suffer, everything suffers, right? And I met my now wife, and after a while we were like, it's strange that she hasn't gotten pregnant. And we went to see a doctor, and the doctor told me in 2018 that if I wanted to have kids, I would need IVF because my system was just fried, like it was done. Even though I felt fine, like I was okay, like I was going to the gym, I was traveling, but my body had a different story. And I was like, no, I'm too stubborn for that. Like, no way, I don't need IVF. I can fix this. And I knew a lot of stuff intellectually. I'd been following Dave Asprey since 2011, the Bulletproof Coffee guy. I've been intermittent fasting. So I was doing a lot, but there was things that I was missing. And then during that year, a lot of things came together. I read Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, 2018. Saw his podcast on Joe Rogan, watched that, bought the book, read it within like 2 days. And realized there was some things I had to change. And then also in that year, I went to a new masculinity retreat in London, ran by Rebel Wisdom, and the guy there did a breathwork session. And it was a 45-minute mixture of holotropic breathing and Wim Hof breathing, which I'd never heard of at the time. So there's like 26 men. They didn't even know each other the day before. We'd done this breathwork session, and at the end of it, it was like, holy hell, what was that? You've got all these guys. They've had this huge... The best way to describe it is just a release. We use the word catharsis, but there was just this sense of, even though there was people... They had sadness, they had grief, they had, elation. There was all these emotions in the room, but there was just this lightness. People had just let go of some stuff. They had tapped into some stuff. They'd let go of some stuff. And I was like, what is this? This is like almost a missing piece. And so that sent me in a rabbit hole. I went back there to facilitate because of what the work they were doing was so powerful. And I loved it, and went on the Wim Hof journey, started getting certified in that in 2019, went on the journey of that. And then we came to Australia in 2019 as I started my certification. And then whilst I was training, COVID hit. So breathwork and COVID weren't the best mixture. You're not allowed to mix with people. You're not allowed to do heavy breathing. No. So it got paused, and then they had to figure out how to do it. So we did all that. So it's a bit of a rambling, meandering story, but it was very much driven by personal health issues. And we didn't need, we have had a baby now, and we didn't need IVF. And I did fix my sleep, and I fixed my nutrition, and I fixed my energy, and I fixed my boundaries, and I fixed lots of things.
Wow.
And some supplements, like just natural supplements. Dave Asprey's book is very good for that. And just got my body back in a place and focused on myself for a while.
Wow, that's so even the ectopic heartbeats, everything's basically in line now.
Yeah, so the ectopic heartbeat does show its head every now and then. But when I first had it, they gave me this contraption to wear. You have to wear it in work. I was walking around the office with it. People
Oh, wow.
weird. And they're like, it's all under your shirt, but it's like it's a full ECG, right?
Oh, okay. So to monitor it and notify you if there's a problem.
You're pressing like a button every time you notice. So it just helps them track, right? And they got it and they said, are you sure this is how often it's happening? I'm like, yes, because it was noticeable.
And it just felt like a pounding in your chest. What did it feel like back then?
Well, I first noticed it. I went to the doctor, because I've gone to him and said, look, there's something weird going on because my heart feels like it's fluttering, like it's like a flutter, right? So they checked me and that was it, right?
I see.
And so effectively the heart beats early, right? So it's rather than having this rhythm, you probably know this, right? So it beats early. So then the next time, because it beats early, it then waits a long time to fill up, and then you get this thud as it contracts, because it then overfills and then has a huge ejection. So, but now I rarely notice it. Sometimes if I'm under a lot of pressure, if I'm stressed, because we're human beings, we still get that, right? I do know it does seem to come back when I'm under a lot of pressure, under a lot of strain, or under some kind of high emotion sometimes. But it's just not there, and it's during my day it's not there. It used to be.
I used to get that a lot, and I had like my whole journey, if you want to call it that, started because I had actually fainted at work one day from an intense anxiety or a panic attack, and I would get that fluttering feeling. It never came up on an EKG. Whenever I went to the doctor, they'd always be like, "Are you a runner? Like your heart seems so good," and I'd be like, "I mean, yeah, but." What do you know about the fainting? And they're like, it's, they basically told me you just have to work on the anxiety. Like your heart seems fine. But your stress is what I'm worried about. And I had the similar story of like work was really stressful, had other things going on. And, but then, the topic's interesting because there's a couple studies about, breathing slowly around 6 breaths per minute. Reduces ectopics totally in some people and by as much as 50% in most people. So
I'd like to take a quick break to tell you about my new app, Pocket Breath Coach. Pocket Breath Coach helps people relieve anxiety with slow breathing exercises. Slow, deep breathing has been shown in multiple studies to relieve anxiety, lower blood pressure, and help people fall asleep. And it even helped me to overcome my own severe anxiety. Pocket Breath Coach comes loaded with lots of breathing exercises that have helped people to relieve anxiety, such as box breathing and 4-7-8, but you can also customize the exercises. So if an exercise feels too slow or too fast, you can adjust it to suit your needs. You can also select your favorite sounds and animations to choose the ones that help you feel the most relaxed. It has a sleep timer so you can drift off to sleep while listening to the calming guided breathing. It's free to download for Android and Apple devices. You can find the link to it in the podcast show notes or go to pocketbreathcoach.com. Now, back to the interview.
So do you do a lot of the slow rhythmic breathing, or is it mostly the Wim Hof, or do you try to do a little of everything?
It's really funny how things came together, right? So when I first started, I'd watched this TED Talk, and you'll probably know it when I mention it, right? So I'd watched this TED Talk before I met my wife, and because I was into all this kind of biohacking stuff, like quite early.
Yeah, I was too. And that's funny that you said that too, because I was into biohacking, not realizing that it was the stress and anxiety that was probably my bigger problem. I was trying to do all these other things to focus.
Trying to paint a house without foundations, right?
Yeah, that's great. Great analogy.
Yeah, and and so I'd had this video, and when we first started talking, and I was still living in Holland at the time. We got together because I was about to move to Cyprus. She was already there, and we started talking, and then we were having a conversation one day about sleep, and she's like, "I'm struggling with my sleep." And I said, "Watch this." So I sent her this video by Dr. Alan Watkins. You know Dr. Alan Watkins from he's got a book called Coherence, So I sent her this video.
Oh, well, yeah. You're talking about the TED Talk, how being brilliant every single day.
That's the one I sent
great.
her, right?
That got me started as well. So that's really funny.
And that was in 2000, and we started talking in 2015. So it was end of 2015, start of 2016. So I already knew this stuff. I had this stuff, and this is our challenge, right? We know stuff intellectually, but we don't put it into practice.
Yeah.
So I'd already been aware of that kind of how you bring your heart rate into how your heart rate variability becomes coherent through this rhythmical breathing. And obviously other biohackers talk about breathing and different types. But since obviously the deep dive happened, I started, I've dug through a lot of Stephen Elliott stuff.
Stephen Elliott, coherentbreathing.com. Yeah, I went deep into his stuff too.
Yeah, I've consumed all that, and so that rhythmical breathing is that's my daily go-to.
And what's your protocol there? Like for me, I like to do around 20 minutes twice a day is kind of what I try to do every day, and then I also do it while falling asleep. Do you have any kind of protocol on what breathing patterns, how much per day? So
I kind of, my time is quite limited at the moment in terms of what I can do. So in the mornings, I get about 2 hours to myself. And at the moment, I'm alternating. One day I'll exercise. I mean, I journal and I read and I have to do my business and stuff like that. So but during that 2 hour window, I try to either do some exercise one day and then the next day I'll do some kind of breath work. And I flip between Wim Hof rounds and coherent breathing. And I kind of go with how I feel. If I feel like I really need to lift myself up again, I'll do some Wim Hof breathing. But if I'm feeling a bit fried, that can be a bit stressful on a bit too much adrenaline. And I'm already a bit tired and I don't want to have that dump later on. So I'll just do some coherence and just bring myself into it. And people ask me this in my workshops, when do you do your breath work? And I say, through the day. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to spot and catch myself all the time. When I'm not breathing optimally, and then I always bring myself back to that rhythmical breathing. Even if I'm walking quite hard, where it's more difficult to maintain the 6 seconds in and the 6 seconds out, I'll still try to maintain a rhythm to get my heart rate under some kind of pattern. But that's my challenge. So every morning I'll do something. Nighttime I tend to I'll maybe do a little bit of coherence, but I'll do some 4-7-8 just to transition. I've kind of put that into my routine. Just to help me transition and associate bed with rest and down and sleep. Yeah.
So that's similar to how I try to do it. And that's one reason I think I told you about my app, the Pocket Breath Coach. It uses sound to guide your breathing. And that was the thing I really wanted when I started, was a way to kind of have an easier time keeping the slow rhythmic breathing while, because I was a software engineer. So I'd be working at my computer, not really talking much anyway. So I would start making like MP3 files to guide my breathing. And then now it's turned into the app. But yeah, I think, I agree. Catching it throughout the day is really, and getting into that habit of just always breathing slowly is made a big difference for me. Because I used to catch myself, working at the computer, doing anything. I'd realize I'd been holding my breath for like 20 or 30 seconds. Yeah. And then I'd take like a deep, fast inhale and then a just fast exhale, and then hold my breath again for 15 or 20 seconds. And leading up to when I actually fainted, that was like, I was in a really bad breathing habit of that. So definitely agree with just catching it throughout the day. Did you work with much HRV biofeedback over the last few years?
I've not used any of the specific, so I've not used like the HeartMath device, or I've not used Stephen Elliott's, but I've got the Oura Ring, so I've had that now since, I've had that since it first came out, really. So that's been 2000. We got it. We were following it for a while, and then 2019 we made the first order. That was the Gen 1.
Yeah, I think I had that one. I think I still have that one. Yeah.
And so I've been watching it that way, but I've not. And I was hoping the Apple Watch would give me some kind of live tracking capability, but it doesn't. And that's the next step for me, really. I mean, I've got a pulse oximeter and stuff like that, but the interesting thing for me would be live tracking of the HRV. And there's all sorts of, I mean, I know Whoop can do it. I think Whoop can do it. And I think there's a guy, I can't remember his name now, but there's Hanu Health. They've got one that they've brought out.
Okay,
Yeah. He's a HRV doctor, or he specializes in HRV, and there's lots of them out there, and I'm just waiting to kind of see if I can get one that integrates with my life more than anything else, because devices are devices, right? I mean,
yeah, I've worked with the HeartMath one a lot, and I'd recommend it, but it's not, as far as for going out about your day, it's not the best. It clips to your earlobe, and it really works best if you sit still, or maybe if you're like doing dishes or some kind of chore where you're kind of standing still, it's good. I worked with it a lot because the breathing exercises, when I started, I definitely was feeling relaxed, but I kind of hit a point where I was trying to figure out what to do next. And then I came across that, the same as you were talking about, that Alan Watkins TED Talk. I had seen it the first time years ago when it first came out. And then I remember I realized, like, hey, what was that TED Talk I watched that was about the breathing and the heart rate? And I ended up finding it again. And he used to have an app that was an HRV biofeedback. And that was the first one I tried. I don't think that one's up anymore. So then I ended up getting the HeartMath, which was, it was really good. Their price point is, now it's around $200 US. I'm not sure what it is down in Australia with shipping and everything, but I really, I learned a lot from doing the biofeedback, especially like figuring out what thoughts were doing to my heart rate. Because I would realize I'd be doing the breathing exercise, and then my coherence score would be going really high.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it would dip. And I'd be like, what just happened? I didn't fall off the breathing. And I realized maybe I started thinking about work, or I started thinking about some interaction either with my wife or with somebody at work. And it would just tank my HRV to where I'd have this smooth, perfect rhythm in sync with my breathing. And then you'd get these crazy spikes of unpredictable. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot doing the HRV on myself. So I guess, how do your...
No, sorry,
go ahead.
I interrupted you there. I interrupted you there.
I was going to change the subject. So
just on that, I mean, I've kind of skirted around the edge. So when I did the Wim Hof certification, it was, so I'm a chartered accountant, right? And so I realized the power of kind of breath work in and of itself. And for me, the primary driver to do the certification was not to only go with that method, right? I wanted some gravitas. So because people, they want to know what your qualifications are, and there aren't any qualifications. There's no body that's monitoring breathwork really that people are doing. It's not like this internationally accepted, recognized institution. But at least what he's doing is amazing, and he's raised a lot of awareness, and he's made it really accessible for people.
And he spent a lot of money doing research on his what he does. So yeah.
And so for me, it was, I want to, my goal is to do some of these systems, right? To get, to do some of these certifications, not because I want necessarily to only do that method, but it's to give the gravitas. I understand the science pretty much already. I've got a sports science background, and so I don't find that bit of it like a study. It's just more like a top up. I mean, I learn new bits every single time. And so I've looked at the HeartMath. I've considered HeartMath. I've considered Stephen Elliott's. I've looked at some of Brian McKenzie stuff. I love what he does. I've known Brian McKenzie for a while through Mobility Ward. I've done some stuff with Kelly Starrett and stuff like that. And so I love what he's doing about skill of stress and art of breath.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, Brian McKenzie's really good.
Look him up.
Yeah, he started off in CrossFit. So he was working with, I don't know if you know these names. So he was working with a guy called Kelly Starrett. He was doing, they look about mobility and managing the body. So if you see people rolling around on foam rollers and lacrosse balls and stuff like that, they kind of started that. And so, yeah, he's really good. He's got a website called Shift Adapt. So he's very good. He's in the US. So I've looked at a lot of these certifications because I want to get better. I'm constantly looking to upskill, but also I would like to bring one of these devices somehow at some point into my workshops, because like you say, people, if they can see the feedback, if you can see that, that really then shows you right in front of yourself, right? In terms of, this is your heart rate now, watch. Let's do this 1 minute. Watch what happens after 1 minute. You know, and at the moment you're kind of, unless you buy 30 devices, which is quite expensive. So I'm trying to think about a way how I could do that. Maybe it's more appropriate for some one-on-one sessions if you're doing that with people. And, but I would love a way to be able to do it with a group. You know, that would be an amazing thing, to people to see it for themselves and do it with a group of people. And
well, I do plan on adding that into my app at some point this year. So I'll keep that in mind as far as trying to make it work for a group. Speaking of working with groups, so how do your workshops go? Do you mind telling a little bit about your workshops?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm obviously persuaded by that group setting, because that's how I first really got into it. And so I love that dynamic of people in a room breathing together with a nice music, good music track in the background, and that kind of synchrony that can happen. And just, you're in a room and you're all kind of having that shared experience. So I really like that. I love doing that. And I like doing one-on-ones, but the group session very much depends who it's for and what their goal is. So if I go to a gym and I'm talking to them about recovery, then I'm using more recovery style breathing. If I'm going to the gym and they want to talk about breathing during sports, then I'm talking to them about, how should you breathe when you're running? What about between, whilst you're doing your exercise, like doing the sets? What about between sets, between reps, as you're walking from one station to the next? What can you do? What can you do on recovery days? Because different tools are appropriate for different things, right? So there's that. And then, but when I'm going to the corporate spaces, it's very much, I talk to them about stress, because that's the word that people get. They kind of know, they might not think they're stressed, but they at least understand that, it resonates with, they get it.
Yeah.
And I'm going there and I'm talking to them about being too busy, big deadlines, lots of deadlines, when was the last time you saw your friends? Are you cooking your own dinners, or are you just rushing as you're on the commute? So I'm starting to get them to realize that, and I talk to them about burnout, because I'm saying that burnout is just downstream from stress. Like, if you stay stressed for long enough, you're going to burn out. Right? So if you can, there's this old analogy. I've got the Daily Stoic book, and I read that, and there's a little analogy in there, and it says, he talks about crossing a river. He says you can either cross the river when it's a little stream, or you can cross it at the mouth when it's a raging torrent and it's a big challenge. And so pick one, and I'm trying to teach people these little skills and techniques that they can catch themselves in a moment. Or if you're going into a presentation, or if you're going into a meeting with the boss, maybe you're negotiating your salary, maybe it's your annual review, maybe it's a key client and they've got a lot of power and you want to make sure you stay composed, whatever it is. So
maybe you get an email, a notification, and it makes your heart rate spike,
Or you see the boss walking towards you and you already know what he's going to say and you're already annoyed. That, and we know that, right? This is, or you get interrupted for the 15th time and you're trying to focus, and what do you do? And so it really depends on what they're doing, but there's a general structure. I have a music track that I use that lasts for about 35 minutes. And during that 35 minutes, I tend to take people through some situational specific skills. So yeah, maybe I'll do a couple of physiological sighs, or maybe I'll do some 4-7-8 breathing, or some ocean breathing, or some coherence, or some box breathing, just to get people to start to some breath awareness activities as well, like how to actually tune into your breathing. And so I take people on this I slowly ramp them up and then bring them up into a Wim Hof style, and we'll do some power breathing, we'll do some breath holds, we'll do some release, because I like to give people that access to that meditative mind at the end. Because at the end, and then everyone sits up and I'm like, how do you feel? And they're like, usually the common answer is, I just feel really light. Or they'll say, I'll ask them, like, what are you thinking? And they just look at me and they're like, nothing. And I'm like, how does that feel? Strange. They're not used to such a still, quiet mind. And it lasts for a few moments for some. But it's giving people that access to show them that there's these things that they can do with their breath that the yogis discovered 3,000 years ago that we are now bringing back with some science and saying, look, here's how you can actually integrate these into your day. So I like to give people some little things that they can use throughout their day, and then more of a Wim Hof, like cyclical hyperventilation type stuff. Tell them when to use it, how to use it, when it's appropriate, when you don't want to use it. Just to give them some tools to walk away with.
Yeah, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to do one of your workshops and they're in the Australia, Sydney area, how do they find you?
Well, again, I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I don't get a lot of time. So I tend to repurpose material. I usually record I'm trying to do a 1-minute video every day on these little things that kind of we know, and trying to make it relatable. So I do these little 1-minute videos. I record them on Instagram, and then I'll also put them on LinkedIn, and maybe the wording is different and I'll have some text around it, but I try to I go for maximum impact to minimum fuss, so I try to make it as quick as possible. So LinkedIn and Instagram are the two main channels that I'm on. I do have a website. There's a contact form on there, but you can direct message on Instagram, and you can direct message on LinkedIn. It's great, and lots of gyms seem to come to me through Instagram. That seems to be their portal, and lots of obviously corporate clients are coming to me through LinkedIn.
Through LinkedIn,
yeah. And on Instagram, what's interesting is been a few recently. I've been working with a few dental nurses. So in Australia, when they want to come to us, even though they're already qualified, maybe I've worked with a couple from Iraq, one from South America. They're coming to Australia. So English is it's their second language, and B, they have to recertify. And so they're trying to follow their career path in Australia, and they're under intense pressure. They do 10 examinations. Basically, they do 10 examinations under exam conditions, 10 patients. You go from one room to the next. The examiner is putting you under pressure. Maybe they're a difficult patient. Maybe it's an intricate procedure, whatever it might be. And they're going to do it in the second language. And so I've started doing a little bit of work with them. How do you manage yourself in that situation? Like, as you're walking from one room to the next, what can you do to just get yourself back, recompose yourself? So that kind of idea. And also for them, it's nice because have you heard of Chris Voss?
The name's familiar. Tell me about him.
So he's the Black Swan guy. He talks a lot about tactical empathy. So he's got this book called Never Split the Difference, but he talks about how to speak to people. And so I'm just, I'm also giving them some of those ideas about what you can say to people to help them talk. I've gone on, again, I do this all the time. I go off on tangents.
No, that's great, because some of that reminds me of something else I'd gotten into a few years ago. It was Crucial Conversations.
Right. Yeah.
And I learned a lot about, I actually need to go look through that book again, because I don't know. I was thinking there might be some alignments, how to talk to people about tough subjects, and to have some alignment where it's not so, I'm trying to think of the word, but so argumentative or things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
To where you can just communicate clearly about tough situations.
Yeah.
So I'll look into that. So his book, it was Never Split the Difference, which. I've seen that book a lot, but I've never read it.
He's really good.
Yeah.
And he might even be from Texas. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah.
Might be. But yeah, his book's great. There's another book I read a long time ago by Dr. Mark Goulston called Just Listen. That's really good. That's really good as well. And because all this stuff, I think it all comes together, because our lives are interactions, right? I mean, obviously there's the difference between, how do you talk to yourself when you're by yourself? And that, as you say, that can really impact how you feel. Marissa Peer, that really famous hypnotherapist, she says, there's only two things that influence how you're feeling: the words you say to yourself and the pictures that you see.
It's a nice way to put it.
It is. And I think she missed a piece. I think she missed the physiology, because I can guarantee if I take your sleep away for a night, you could have, you might not be saying anything to yourself or seeing any pictures, but you're going to be as grumpy as hell. And so, and so the physiology piece is missing, and that's where our work is really important. And the interaction with people getting your physiology under control. Like if you're someone who gets anxious in the middle of a conversation, like how can we help you talk to people? You know, what can you say that it's genuine, but it's like almost giving you a little framework about how to just sit in the middle of a conversation and help people talk to you. Because, you know, otherwise you're going to get stuck in your head and you're going to be thinking about, oh, what do I want to say? What question do I want to ask? And then the mind can take you off somewhere and you've stopped listening, right?
Yeah, it's great to have little frameworks to follow. You know, there's some that are coming to mind. I'm trying to remember the book. The author was David Burns, who wrote another book called Feeling Good, which is about like cognitive behavioral therapy. He wrote another book that's about it's really about communication. It was called Feeling Good Together because it was about relationships and communication. And in his framework, he called it EAR. It's EAR, empathy, assertiveness, and respect. And
nice.
It's like nice to have little frameworks to follow. Yeah, you know, it's because I'm totally agreeing with you. The physiology I feel like is almost like a foundational part, and then but once you've got the physiology, how do you actually still communicate in that calm, centered way? And it's just so nice to have little frameworks to follow.
Well, I you know, in some of the work, it depends on the theme of the workshop, but sometimes I'll get them at the start, you know, when they've got their eyes closed, I'll say, make yourself feel negative, sad, angry, annoyed, whatever it is, just do it. I don't care, just do it. And then I'll say, make yourself feel more positive, happy, joyful, whatever. And I'll say, I don't know what you thought, I can't read your mind, but I can guarantee you did one of two things. You were either replaying something in your head, some words, or you were seeing someone's face or a picture. That's what you were doing, right? To show people that they can influence how they feel without doing anything. And yeah, it's crucial. And that on that empathy piece, that's why Chris Voss's stuff is really good, because he's not claiming to have a new method. He's just reframing it. And he talks a lot about mirrors and labels. So he just says, because empathy is about showing the other person that you can hear what they say, right? And you understand and you're with it. And so one of the things he talks about is he talks about mirroring. So when someone says something like, I don't know, one of the examples I use with a dental nurse, for example, she said, oh, you know, one of the examiners, they'll say, oh, I'm just in incredible pain right now. Like it just really hurts. My whole face hurts. And you'll just say, whole face? So you'll just use like 1 to 3 words of theirs, maybe the last 3 words, or you'll just pick 3 words that seem really important. You'll say it back to them and they'll go, yeah, like just right down here. Like, you know, it's been sore all day. And you're like, all day? And they'll say, yeah, you know, well, particularly in the morning, and you're just you're mirroring back to them. You're showing that you're listening. You're using words when it seems appropriate, right? So you mirror them back. Or he talks about labeling. So they'll say something like, you know, I can't believe you were meant to fix this and it's not fixed yet. And you'll just say something like, it sounds like you're really disappointed that this hasn't gone away yet. So you're trying to label something that's happening underneath. Like you're listening to what they're saying. You're not labeling like, you seem angry. Because like, well, of course I'm angry. I've just told you I'm angry. But it seems like you're really disappointed, or it sounds like you're really frustrated, or you're trying to label something dynamic underneath. And then they talk and they'll say, yeah, I thought this would be fixed by now. And, you know, and then you can, so he talks a lot about those little tools, and they're just little tools that you can use. And
yeah, that's really great. Because just talking about some of those phrases like all day, all the time, those are those phrases that are, I was talking about the book Feeling Good. He talks about cognitive distortions, how it's not really a realistic, or it's all or nothing thinking. Like it's not really accurate to say it's happening all the time, constantly. It's happening maybe more often than you want, but and so I like that idea of mirroring. You know,
it's powerful.
Yeah.
And those other, I mean, I did a video a while back, again, a 1-minute video, and I say it's the most dangerous word we use with ourselves. It's the word should, right? And that's one of the cognitive distortions as well.
Yep. And it is.
It's people think I'm exaggerating when I say it's probably the most dangerous word you use with yourself, because you are just putting yourself under so much guilt and strain in the way you speak to yourself.
Yeah.
It's so anyway, yeah, we could talk about that for ages, I think. Yeah, but
we could.
How, the impact it has on you when you use such a word.
Yeah, it is funny that there's just certain words, all, should, constantly,
Never.
Yeah, never is another great one. Trying to think of some of the others that just simple words that but it's interesting to use the words back to someone, because you have to be delicate about it, because sometimes if you point out someone's cognitive distortions, they it might rub them the wrong way. But having a good way of bringing empathy to it, like you were saying, is probably really the key. Not trying to like tell them they're wrong, but trying to get to what they actually mean, and get around some of these phrases, these all or nothing phrases.
Yeah. And those two little tools, that labeling and mirroring, is very powerful. And you can and again, it's about integrating it into your day. When you go to the coffee shop, use those tools with people, and just start practicing. Because I go to the gym and I talk to people, I say, you don't come here once and expect to be super fit, right? So you've got to get to a point where you're integrating these things in the day. And the first thing I always get people to try and focus on is just becoming aware of their breath.
Yeah.
Can you actually just catch yourself when you're holding your breath, or at least spot some signs? You've been standing at your desk, you haven't moved, and you're really thirsty. How is that possible? What do you think that's telling you? Like, where's that thirst come from? You haven't moved. Maybe you've been breathing a lot out of your mouth and you've got rid of all this moisture and you're really dry. So spot these little things that you can tune into. And I try to make it really practical with people, because otherwise I'm just some other guy who's spouting science at people. And you can have those conversations, and I like those conversations with people, and talking about some of the science behind it. But ultimately, most people, they just want to make it relatable and understand, breath work. Oh, that's so woo woo. Oh, really? Let me calm you down in 10 seconds.
Yeah. That is one thing I've liked about the breath work, because I did get into meditation before breath work. I did some of the meditation apps, and as far as the woo woo side of it, like, it always felt like focusing on the breath was more concrete. I'm glad I spent the time meditating that I did. Although it didn't necessarily help with my anxiety, it gave me maybe more awareness, but the breathing always felt so much more concrete, and it kind of took all the woo woo out of it for me, basically. Did you spend much time meditating when you were into the biohacking and all that?
Yeah, before that, I had tried the meditation, and before I went to the new masculinity retreat, I'd done Vipassana. I'd done a 10-day Vipassana retreat. So
you did? Wow.
Yeah, I'd done that, and me and my wife did it together, and we'd been trying. We're all seeking, right? And I think the reason, again, I talk to people about stress, but your stress, it's basically emotion, right? It's all about how you feel. And you hit the nail on the head, because you can sit and meditate, and that's dealing with the mind. And that's a challenge. And I say this to people all the time, like, meditation is probably too advanced for you at the moment.
Exactly.
It's an advanced skill. And it takes a lot of time. And once you get there, great. Like the neuroscience, the studies, the science is on meditation, right? But it's a long practice. It takes a commitment and regular practice, and you've got to get through all that frustration and sitting through all those moments where I'm not doing it properly. This isn't working. I'm too uncomfortable. My knees hurt. Like, that's the point. But in the moment, you can get really frustrated, and it can make things worse. Whereas a breathwork session, the reason breathwork works is it does two things. It changes your physiology, and it refocuses your mind. And that's why it works, because you're dealing with both pieces of your emotion. You're dealing with the mind, and you're dealing with the body. And because those two pieces always come together to completely dictate how you're feeling in the moment. You're dealing with both. And so that's why it's much more accessible for people. And that's why the Wim Hof style is great, because it takes people through this whole like a 20-minute journey, or a holotropic session, or a 20-minute coherence breathing. The first few minutes of coherence feels weird and a challenge and awkward and cumbersome. And then after a while, it's like you just settle into this and you almost drift off. And yeah, those two things, dealing with the mind and dealing with the body. And
well, let's see. Trying to think of anything else we can talk about. The Wim Hof. I have fallen off the Wim Hof over the last few years, but I remember early on, because I got into some of the breath work after I had fainted, and I remember doing the Wim Hof, and I didn't even think about this at the time, but it would get me close to that point of feeling like I was going to faint. And it almost was all. It was so funny that, well, at the time, it was almost like an exposure therapy where I was getting close to this feeling of fainting, but then realizing I'm not actually going to faint. It just feels weird in my head, or if you do get close to fainting, it's fine, basically. But then I think I saw on a Andrew Huberman podcast, he said he talked about a study where I think they're actually using Wim Hof breathing as an exposure therapy for anxiety, because it brings you into that. It kind of brings you into a more sympathetic state, and so you can get more comfortable with that anxiety. But then I definitely remember that the same thing. You get kind of these really uncomfortable feelings, but then once you're done, it kind of washes away, and you feel really good afterwards.
And again, you've hit the nail on the head, because I say this to people because you don't really know who's in the room, and you can talk to them, but sometimes you don't know who's there. And I'll say, what we're doing, I'm gonna bring your nervous system up. You're gonna release a lot of adrenaline in your body, and you might feel like you're about to panic. And so if you get to that point, I'm just guiding you. If you get to that point, I'll encourage you to lean into it a little bit, just to go with it a little bit, trust yourself a little bit. But if it still feels like it's too much, guess what you do? You slow down, you wait, you slow your breathing down, and then you join back in when you're ready. And what I'm saying to them there is, this is the transferable skill. Because when you're in the middle of a situation and you notice that you're having a panic response, you might just be able to go, oh, I know what I need to do. I need to slow my breathing down. And you'll catch yourself, and you'll realize that if you just slow your breathing down, you can take the edge off that thing that's rising, that wave that's rising in you. Now, I've never had a panic attack, right? So I can't speak to people experientially, but I've been in those situations when you're shaking and you're trembling and you don't know what to say, and your mind is closed, your focus is gone, and you're in some. So I can relate in that way. And it's, if you can catch yourself in those moments and just take the edge off. And that's where the Wim Hof stuff, then it's the transferable skills into life. And yeah, because there are people that you can send over the edge if they just keep going, and if they think they've got to keep going and keep going, you can feel like you're about to faint, because the body is going, this is too much, off.
Yeah.
And that's it, off. And it just switches you off. Right?
Yeah. And especially if they've fainted before, I think that's probably part of it. Because that was because I had fainted a few times basically, and it almost got easier to faint. By the third time I had fainted, it was just like you're saying, it just switched off before you even knew what to do. Yeah. Not to cut you off there, but
no, you're right, and that's the other stuff we haven't even really spoken about is the stuff to do with Buteyko and oxygen advantage breathing. Long, slow, light breathing to get.
And that was a huge help for me too.
Yeah, and that's getting your tolerance to CO2 up is something it's really interesting to me, and because
I learned a lot working with a pulse ox.
Yeah.
Just to say what
you think you can't breathe, and you look at it and you go 98%.
Yeah, I got plenty of oxygen.
I've got plenty of oxygen, right? So what's going on? What's really
I even started finding for myself that I used to get a feeling of breathlessness, like I just couldn't get a deep breath. And I started to realize I would be like topped out at 100% and feeling breathless. And I just started to realize, okay, I'm like, I just can't get any more oxygen. It's already fully saturated.
Yeah.
And the other funny thing, it kind of used to send me into that panic response to get down to 94%, 95%. And then with more practice. And for anyone listening, we're talking about Buteyko breathing, which is more like, do you want to give an overview of Buteyko breathing?
All I would say, I mean, again, I keep it relatable. So Buteyko breathing is the complete opposite of cyclical hyperventilation for sure. It's breathing as lightly and as deep, but light and slowly as you can tolerate. Because if you start to breathe really slowly, CO2 starts to build. You can't get rid of it quick enough, and you start to build it up, and you get this. It's a different sensation, right? It's countering the impact of over breathing on people. Because like what you were saying, you had all that oxygen, but you felt like you had to breathe more because you'd got rid of so much CO2. You couldn't use the oxygen. It was there waiting to be used, but you couldn't use it.
Yeah, that's an interesting part, that if you don't have that, the CO2 is key to to absorbing the oxygen. That's a great book, Oxygen Advantage. Oxygen Advantage. I learned a lot from that one. Maybe I've never. Have you met Patrick or?
No, I've not met him. No, I'd love to meet him. I've not met him. He's a great guy. And
I haven't met him either.
Out there doing this stuff for so long and just spreading the message. He's trying to help people with asthma and these real breathing maladies, as you would call them. He's great, and that's, I think, I've watched quite a few of your videos, and I was using the app the other day, and what I like is you're doing. That's why I said that, we're quite similar, because you're also bringing in all of the different tools. You're trying to show people that there's all these tools out there, and here's how you can use them depending on what's going on for you in your life. And that's the thing. I mean, and people, like you say, we often think we're breathing because we need oxygen. Say, but why do you need it? Why do you need it? And when I do the Wim Hof session, and I sit them up and I say, okay, in that last round, you held your breath for 3 minutes. And most people go, what? And I go, 3 minutes. You didn't breathe for 3 minutes. And they just look at you. I mean, obviously there's some people that have done it before, or they get it. But most people, the overwhelming majority in any room, they just look at me in disbelief. And I'm like, so how is that possible? And then you talk to them. And then when I'm in a gym, I'm saying to them, so what's the implications? You're walking around a gym, you're walking around and you're exercising, and you're going, and you're panting. But what's the implications? You're just blowing off all that CO2 and all that oxygen's in your blood, and you need it in your muscles, but it's not letting go of it. So what's the implications? Get your breathing under control. Anyway,
it is crazy. The first time I remember the first time holding my breath after, because the Wim Hof method is you do 25, 30 deep breaths, and then which is, I guess, an old pranayama technique, but then Wim's change to it is that you hold, after getting through 25 or 30 breaths, you hold your breath as long as you can, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I did it, I held my breath for like 3 minutes, and I could have gone longer, is what I remember. I was like, this is crazy. I've never been a good breath holder. I maybe could do 90 seconds at the most if I really tried. And then I remember the first time trying the Wim Hof method. I hit 3 minutes easily, and I was like, okay, I could go longer, but I'm gonna go ahead and start breathing again.
And again, all these different things. It's just showing people what's actually possible and how that translates into their life. The reason you're feeling tired all the time is you're probably over breathing and you're blown up, and you're not releasing oxygen to the body, and so you feel tired. And that's why I love the coherence stuff. I love that and I do like that, because there seems to be there's more robust science behind it. The apps and the biofeedback, that's different. That's like a different layer of kind of intrigue, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably because I've always loved science, and then I was an engineer, and so some of that is probably why it struck a nerve so much with me, the coherence and the HRV, because there's so much there's so much software and technology involved too. That I got really excited about the coherence, and I don't use the biofeedback every day like I used to, but I'll depending on the day, I'll do 20 minutes of breathing with biofeedback just to see how things are going. And well, Thomas, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think we should maybe meet up, do another podcast sometime in the future, and we can get into more of this, because I feel like we did we kind of had a buffet of all these topics, and we could go a little deeper into some of this. So if someone wants to do one of your workshops, I know I've got some people on my channel from Australia. Do you mainly do your workshops in Australia, or do you do any in England or anywhere else in the world?
Well, I'm here, so I don't travel for workshops because Australia is far away. But I do them in person, but I do stream them as well. So depending on where they are, I've done some with companies that have been purely online. So we stream so they can access. They've got offices all around the world, and then obviously that will also dictate what we can do in a workshop. Because a lot of the time they'll be sat at their office, or they'll be sat on their chairs and stuff like that. So it's more, I can't really take you through a full Wim Hof session because I don't want you getting too lightheaded. You sat on a chair. So what else do we do? And I do more coherence work with them and get them to just do a really deep relaxation and just feel like that tension melt away and just dissolve. But yeah, just, I love doing the in-person stuff. It's just a different energy, and it's really powerful. One-on-ones and online as well. So
I'll put a link to your website. It's I think it's Thomas with Breath Space. I'll put a link to your website.
Thomas, Breath Space with Thomas. .com.
Breathspace with Thomas.
And then my social links are on there, and contact form and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. Well, definitely enjoyed talking to you. I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, likewise, Luke. I'm going to keep using the app as well. I've really enjoyed using it. It's nice to have something that is the visual and the music, and it takes that kind of having to actually think about what you're doing away, which helps.
Oh, well, that's great to hear.